What was the Mica Bay incident of 1849, and how were the Métis involved in the Robinson-Huron Treaty that was signed in Sault Ste. Marie in 1850?
Awesome question. So, um, Canada, the British in 1763, the British Crown declared what they call the Royal Proclamation, right? That said that in order for Britain to take any land from Indigenous people, that they had to get permission, right? And that's where the idea of treaties comes from, right? And in the 1840s, there were mining companies that were mining here in the area around Sault Ste. Marie, and they were operating without, there was no treaty, right? Canada hadn't gotten permission or consent from the original people here, from the Métis people, from the Ojibwe people, from the Odawa people. They just simply didn't have that permission. So the Mica Bay incident, 1848, 1849-ish, in the fall of that 1848, the First Nations community, under the leadership of two of their most well-known and respected chiefs, Chief Chingwah and Chief Nebnegoching, and the Métis community under the leadership of Eustache Lesage and Charles Boyer and Pierre Boyer, or Pierre Lesage, sorry. They organized together. They got people from the Métis community and from the First Nations community, and they went to Mica Bay and they borrowed a cannon from the old fort, and they went there and shut the mine down, right? And they said, you don't have permission to be taking our resources without an agreement, right? You have to get an agreement with us. And so the four of them, the four leadership were arrested. Chief Chingwah and Chief Nebnegoching ended up in Toronto. They were let go because the judge said, yeah, they're right. They're just simply right. You have to get a treaty with them. So September, the next year, 1849, the Vidal-Anderson Commission came up here. And there's another map. I think it's the next slide. There it is. So the Vidal-Anderson Commission, they came up here and they were sent to study, to see who are the people that are up there. Who are we going to have to deal with, right? And they wrote a report that talked about dealing with the First Nations and dealing in some way with the claims of the Métis people. And if you look here, so I wish I had a laser pointer or something, but you see that sort of big square almost in the center of the map. So that's the only building that's on that map that still exists today. That's the old stone house, right? So that's the Ermitanger Clerk house that's there, right? This map shows the original settlement, right? The original Métis settlement that was here. And so those two that are highlighted in yellow, those are actually two of my sort of direct answers. I'm related to a lot of people on that map, but the most direct link is through those two, the Busno family, right? Who were the biggest, one of the biggest Métis families here at the time. And so when the treaty was signed, Chief Chingwah and Chief Nebnegoching, they stood up and they said that they would not agree to signing the treaty until the rights of the half-breeds, right, as we were then known to the law, were recognized, right? And our people had written petitions and said that our land rights had to be recognized. And so the treaty commissioner, Robinson, he said, well, I don't have a mandate to deal with the half-breeds. I only have a mandate to deal with the Indians, right? And I use that language because that's the language of the time, right? We don't talk like that anymore. But he said, I don't have a mandate to deal with them, but I can come back next year with a mandate. So that was 1850. So 166 years later, we're still waiting. He never came back, right? But they promised that the land that we lived on at the time would be protected, that we would be able to maintain that. within 10 years, 90% of that had been lost to settlers coming in and to using their overwhelming economic power to force our community out. And so we're still waiting for that promise, right? And that's considered to be an issue of the honor of the Crown, right? Because as someone who was authorized by the Crown, by the government, to come here and to speak on the government's behalf, made a commitment that they would return to make that treaty. They never returned, right? And so that's a very serious violation of the honor of the Crown, right? So those are issues that we, going back to that previous question of what issues that we have today, right? This is something that I'm incredibly passionate about, right? Is that promise that was made to our community, that promise is going to have to be lived up to someday, right? That promise is going to have to be lived up to because the honor of the Crown is at stake.